Leviathan, Chapter 40. The pistons were the trickiest bits to draw. There was something about the way they fit together, the clanker logic of them, that blistered Darren's brain. She'd been sketching the new engines all afternoon, imagining the drawings in some future edition of the Manual of Aeronautics. But even if no one ever saw them, the warm day was excuse enough for lodging there. The airship was only 100 yards above the water, the afternoon sun bouncing from the waves and setting everything aglitter. After 3 nights shipwrecked on a glacier, it seemed the perfect afternoon to lie in the rat lines, soak up the heat, and draw. But even with the Mediterranean Sea stretching out in all directions, the clankers never seemed to relax. Alec and Klopp had been busy down on the pod since noon, fashioning wind shields to protect the engine pilots. That's what they were calling themselves. Pilots, not engine men or any proper air service term. They'd already forgotten that the real pilots were on the bridge. Then again, she'd heard it rumored that the ship didn't need pilots these days. Darwinist or clankers, the whale had developed an independent streak, a tendency to choose its own way among the thermals and updrafts. Some of the crew wondered if the wreck had rattled the beastie's attic, but Darren reckoned it was the new engine. Who wouldn't feel feisty with all that power? Who wouldn't feel feisty with all that power? A bee was crawling across her sketch pad, and she waved it away. The hives had come out of their 3-day hibernation, hungry, gorging themselves on the wildflowers of Italy as the Leviathan headed south. The strafing hawks looking fat and happy this afternoon, full of wild hares and stolen piglets. "Mr. Sharp," came the master's coxswain's voice. Darren almost snapped to attention. But then she saw the message lizard staring at her, its beady eyes blinking. "Please report to the captain quarters," the lizard continued, "without delay." "Aye, sir, right away." Darren winced, and she heard her voice squeak like a girl's. She lowered it and said, "End message." Gathering her pads and pencils as the beastie scampered away, Darren wondered what she'd done wrong. Nothing bad enough to earn an audience with the captain, not that she could remember. Mr. Rigby had even commanded her on taking Alec hostage during the Stormwalker attack. Commended her. Mr. Rigby had even commended her on taking Alec hostage during the Stormwalker attack, but her nerves were twitching nonetheless. The captain's quarters were up near the bow, next to the navigation room. The door was half open, and Captain Hobbs sat beside his desk, the wall charts rustling in the warm breeze from an open window. Darren saluted smartly. "Midshipman Sharp reporting, sir." "At ease, Mr. Sharp," the man said, which only made her more nervous. "Please come in and shut the door." "Aye, sir," she said. The captain's door was a solid piece. The captain's door was a solid piece of natural wood, not fabricated balsa, and it thumped shut with a heavy finality. "May I ask you, Mr. Sharp, your opinion of our guests?" "The clankers, sir?" Darren frowned. "They're very clever and quite determined about keeping those engines running. Good allies to have, I'd say." "Would you? Then it's lucky they aren't officially our enemies." The captain tapped his pencil against the cage that sat on his desk. The carrier turned inside. It fluttered, its tongue slipping out the taste of air. I've just learned that England is not at war with Austria-Hungary. Not yet. At the moment, we need only concern ourselves with the Germans. Well, that's handy, sir. Indeed, the captain leaned back and smiled. You're rather friendly with young Alec, aren't you? Aye, sir. He's a good lad. So he seems. A young boy like that needs friends, especially having run away from home and country. The captain lifted an eyebrow. Sad, isn't it? Darren nodded, saying carefully, I suppose so, sir. And all quite mysterious. Here we are, at their mercy, mechanically speaking, and yet we don't know much about Alec and his friends. Who are they, really? They are a bit cagey, sir, Darren said, which wasn't a lie. Here he is, the captain. Quite so. Captain Hobbs picked up a piece of paper before him. The First Lord of the Admiralty himself has become curious about them and requests that we keep him informed. So it might be useful, Dylan, if you keep your ears open. Darren let out a slow breath. This was the moment, of course, when duty required her to tell the captain all she knew. That Alec was the son of Archduke Ferdinand, and that the Germans were behind his father's murder. Alec had said it himself. This wasn't just family business. The assassination had started the whole barking war after all. And now Lord Churchill himself was asking about it. But she promised Alec not to tell. Darren owed him that much after setting the sniffers on him the first time they'd met. For that matter, the whole barking ship owed him a debt. Alec had revealed his hidden place to help them fight the Zeppelins, giving away his Stormwalker and a castle full of stores, and all he'd ask in return was to stay anonymous. It seemed impolite for the captain even to be asking. She couldn't break her promise, not like this, without even talking to Alec first. Darren saluted smartly. I'm happy to do whatever I can, sir. And she left without telling the captain any of it. That evening, when she went to find Alec on egg duty, the machine room was locked. Darren gave the door a couple of loud raps. Alec opened it and smiled, and he didn't stand aside. But he didn't stand aside. Dylan, good to see you. He lowered his voice. But I can't let you in. Why not? One of the eggs is looking pale, so we've had to rearrange the heaters. It's all very complicated. Dr. Barlow said that another person in the room could affect the temperature. Darren rolled her eyes. As Constantinople drew closer, the Lady Boffin grew more and more protective of her eggs. They'd survive an airship crash, 3 nights on a glacier, and a Zeppelin attack, and yet she seemed to think they'd shatter if anyone looked at them sideways. That's a lot of yuckum, Alec. Let me in. Are you sure? Yes. We're keeping them close enough to body temperature. Another person in there won't hurt. Alec hesitated. Well, she also said that Taza hasn't had a walk all day. He'll be tearing down the walls of her cabin if you don't see to him. Darren sighed. It was amazing how the Lady Boffin could be so tiresome without even being in the room. "I've got something important to tell you, Alec. Shove aside and let me in." He frowned, but relented, letting her squeeze past into the sweltering machine room. "Blisters! Are you sure it's not too hot in here?" Alec shrugged. "Dr. Barlow's orders. She said the sick one needed to be kept warm." Darren looked at the cargo box. 2 of the shivering eggs were nestled together at one end. The other one was alone in the middle, surrounded by a pile of glowing heaters, far too many. She took a step forward to check the thermometer, then frowned. They were Dr. Barlow's barking eggs. If she wanted to cook them, fine. Darren had more important things to worry about. She turned to Alec. "The captain called for me today. He asked about you." Alec's face darkened. "Oh." "Don't worry, I didn't tell him anything," she said. "I mean, I wouldn't break my promise." "Thank you, Dylan." Even though she cleared her throat, trying to sound casual. "He told me to keep an eye on you and said I should tell him anything I found out." Alec nodded slowly. "He gave you a direct order, didn't he?" Darren opened her mouth, but no words came out. Something was shifting inside her. On her way here, she'd hoped Alec would give her permission to tell the captain, solving the whole dilemma. But now an entirely different desire was creeping into her mind. What she really wanted, Darren realized, was for Alec to know that she'd lied for him, that she'd go on lying for him. She suddenly had that feeling again, the same as when Alec had told her his parents' story. A cackling in the overheated air, her skin tingled where he'd hugged her. This wasn't gonna right at all. I suppose he did. Alex sighed. A direct order. So if they find out you've hidden my identity, they'll hang you as a traitor. Hang me? Yes, for consorting with the enemy. Darren frowned. In all her weighing of promises and loyalties, she hadn't thought that far ahead. Well, not quite the enemy. We're not at war with Austria, the captain says. Not yet. But from what Vulgar's heard on the wireless, it'll only be a week or so. He smiled sadly. Funny, all those politicians trying to decide if we're enemies or not. Aye, barking hilarious, Darren murmured. She was the one standing here, not some politician. This was her decision, I promise, Alec. But you also took an oath to the air service and to King George, he reminded her. I'm not going to make you break that oath. You're too good a soldier for that, Dylan. She swallowed, shifting on her feet. But what will they do? What will they do to you? I'll be locked up tight, Alex said. I'm too valuable to let escape into the wilds of the Ottoman Empire. And when we get back to England, they'll put me somewhere safe until the war's over. Blister, she said. But you saved us. The boy shrugged. The sadness was still in his eyes, not brimming over into tears again, but deeper than she'd ever seen it.